Is it true that the section chief only finished middle school? Yeah, that's right. He joined the company as a factory worker when he was a teenager. When I replied, Bob Thompson furrowed his brow. He's an elite graduate from a prestigious university. Though he's 3 years younger than me, he doesn't seem to like that someone who didn't finish high school is his boss. I've returned to headquarters after 15 years, but I didn't expect there'd still be folks saying stuff like this. So, I'm telling you, there's no way I can deal with some old guy who didn't even finish high school being the boss. Bob says this while looking down on me even more. At that moment, there's a brief stir in the surroundings. He's the next company CEO, Bob Tremble, biting his lip in frustration. And then, that incident occurs. I'm Jack Sawyer, a 34-year-old office worker. This spring, I was promoted from branch manager of a small regional office to section chief of the sales division at headquarters. It's been 15 years since I last worked at the main office. I'm Jack, assigned here starting today. I'll do my best as section chief, so please treat me well. While giving the formal greeting, I scanned the faces of the employees. Among the unfamiliar faces, there were also some familiar ones that had aged a bit since 15 years ago. As I check each face, my eyes meet with one woman. She smiles quietly, applauding softly with everyone else. She whispered in a soundless voice, "Welcome back." Those words involuntarily made me smile. I gave her a small nod. Sarah Davis, the manager of the sales department. She's also an acquaintance from 15 years ago. After the morning meeting ends and regular work begins, Sarah and I review the current work in the sales department. I've already gone over the broad strokes with my predecessor since the transfer was decided, but sales work is constantly evolving. I needed to check the progress status with each person in charge. Jack, it's been a while. Or should I call you Chief now? Mr. Johnson, it's been a long time. I heard you even served as a branch manager over there? That's impressive. It was just a small branch office. I transferred when it was newly established and became a senior member just cause of my long service. You're still as modest as ever. It's a big deal to become a manager these days without finishing high school. Mr. Johnson. Sarah calls his name admonishingly. I understand. Well, nice to have you here, Chief. Mr. Johnson is a senior colleague who's been in the sales department since I joined the company. He must be in his mid-40s now. His face shows signs of aging too. He's not a bad person. Rather, he's the type who looks out for others, but he often says unnecessary things, blurting out whatever's on his mind. Given his age, it wouldn't be strange if he were in a management position, but he says he's not the type to be above others, so he's still in a regular position. He probably understands his own personality well. The atmosphere goes quiet for a moment after Mr. Johnson's comment, but everyone soon resumes their work as before. I can't help but smile wryly at this familiar atmosphere. These days, it's rare to find someone who only finished middle school, so it's no wonder folks are surprised. Still, there's no need to hide it, so I resume checking on everyone's work, just like the others. You're Bob from International Sales, right? Nice to meet you. I look forward to working with you. The company entered overseas markets last year, and Bob's in charge of that. He graduated from a top university, he's good at his job, and he's fluent in foreign languages. Though it's small scale, he's pretty much single-handedly managing the company's first overseas sales. He's about 3 years younger than me. I'd heard about his competence from my predecessor and Sarah, but I was also told there were issues with his personality. Yes. Is it true what Mr. Johnson was saying earlier, that you only finished middle school? Yeah, that's right. I joined the company as a factory worker when I was a teenager. When I answered, Bob furrowed his brow. I never thought I'd meet someone in this company who didn't finish high school, let alone as my boss. Bob sighs heavily, not even trying to hide his dissatisfaction. That has absolutely nothing to do with the job. Besides, the chief has more experience in sales than you do, and he was so successful in setting up the previous branch office that he became a manager. Don't you know that? Before I could say anything, Sarah scolded him sharply. It's wonderful that in this company, you can become a manager just by succeeding in some rural branch office. But isn't it a bit much to be in charge at headquarters with that education and background? It must be tough for you, Chief, with subordinates like us. There's clear disgust in his eyes as he shrugs with a sarcastic smile. Thanks for your concern. I look forward to working with you. When I greet him with a smile, Bob looks a bit surprised. Likewise, he replies grumpily. I can't believe there are still people with such outdated thinking. I'm used to prejudice against my education and background. I can't let myself get caught up in this kind of thing. After finishing greetings and progress checks, the morning flew by in no time. I grew up in an ordinary family of 4, my parents, my younger brother, and me. However, everything changed when my dad passed away in my first year of high school. My self-employed father had been struggling with business debts. Worn out and desperate, he turned to drinking and died one day in a traffic accident. My mom was a housewife and knew nothing about Dad's business. All Dad left for the family was a mountain of debt. Mom didn't hesitate to refuse the inheritance, so nothing was left of Dad's assets. I was attending a private high school, but it became financially impossible to continue, so I dropped out before my second year. My mom, who had never worked before, had no chance of getting a decent job. I'm sorry, Jack. You worked so hard every day at that high school you got into. And Timmy just started middle school. At this rate, seeing my mom apologize in tears, I immediately decided to start working. That's when the current company CEO, who was my dad's best friend and close to our family, reached out to us. Dad had only confided his troubles to the CEO, his best friend. He reportedly said in tears, "I'm worried about my family. Please, at least help them. I'm grateful to the CEO who took me in, just as Dad had asked. But that should have been Dad's job." My feelings of disappointment and hatred towards Dad were immeasurable. Protecting the family became my mission as the one left behind. I especially wished for my little brother to have a normal student life. I was the only one who could protect him. As a middle school graduate, I moved into the company dormitory and started working as a factory employee. When I left home, my brother clung to me with a tearful face, asking, "Why are you leaving?" I couldn't tell him it was to support him. I didn't want him to think his brother had to sacrifice himself and work with just a middle school education because of our dad. I also didn't want my brother, who had looked up to our dad, to despise him like I did. At least in my brother's mind, I wanted our dad to remain a great and beloved figure. "I'm moving into the school dorm, Timmy. I'm counting on you to look after Mom." This lie I told my brother was the biggest one I've ever told in my life, before or since. While eating my lunch in the cafeteria, Sarah sat down next to me with her own lunch. "Don't mind Bob, okay, Jack?" Sarah, the CEO's daughter and my childhood friend, calls me by my first name when we're alone. "Yeah, I'm not worried about him. He's just like I heard. He's been looking down on others since he joined as a new grad. Maybe it's pride from his fancy college, but he's been aggressively pushing forward with overseas sales all by himself. I just hope he doesn't mess up. It's troubling, you know." Sarah speaks softly as she opens her lunchbox. It's filled with the same side dishes as mine, all homemade by her. The meat-wrapped rapeseed blossoms is delicious. Very spring-like. Really, I'm glad. It's been a while since I made you a lunch, so savor it. Sarah smiles a bit proudly. Sarah is also my precious fiancée. After I achieved results at the branch office and returned to headquarters, we plan to get married within the year, with her turning 30 this year. You know, your mom gave me this rapeseed blossoms when I met her the other day. Is that so? Sarah keeps in touch with my mom more often than I do. Your mom was so happy you're coming back here. I'm glad too, that we can work together and eat lunch together. It's really great, Sarah murmurs reflectively, and I smile back at her, saying, "Me too." Maybe feeling shy, Sarah shifts her gaze to the TV in the cafeteria. Oh look, the TV is showing a lunchtime info program, with a caption saying, Interview with Timmy Sawyer, the mastermind behind the cutting edge of digital art. Timmy Sawyer is being interviewed. He started a digital content production company while still in college, gaining attention both in America and abroad. Now, that company is globally recognized. The CEO is my younger brother, a young leader in his 20s who graduated from a prestigious university and created globally competitive new content. He's frequently featured in magazines and on TV. While I'm proud of my brother, I rarely mention his name. Timmy hates me. He thinks I left home and abandoned him and Mom. I intentionally didn't visit Timmy or Mom to make him think that, and that's fine. The year Timmy graduated from college, Mom's health deteriorated. Even though I was sending money, it must have been tough for Mom, who had been a full-time housewife until Dad died, to work alone and raise a middle school son through college. Mom, who was never very strong to begin with, collapsed like a taut string snapping, with no time to grieve after Dad died. She was exhausted, both physically and mentally. When I got a rare call from Timmy, I rushed to the hospital. Seeing my aged mother sleeping in the hospital bed, I regretted for the first time not being able to support her closely. I'll cover Mom's hospital bills and living expenses from now on. I won't accept any help from you. When we met at the hospital after a long time, Timmy looked like he wanted to say something, but that's all he said to me as I kept apologizing. Timmy's amazing, isn't he? Did you tell him you're back here? There's no need to, right? Your mom said she wants the three of you to meet. I'd like to get along like we used to, but it's probably impossible. You know, Timmy's busy. As I was giving a vague answer, Bob passed by with his cafeteria tray. Is Timmy Sawyer possibly your brother, Chief? Yeah, he is. Bob mumbles. Huh, you don't look alike, as he compares my face with Timmy's on the TV screen answering interview questions. My brother Timmy has androgynous, refined features. I take after my dad, and as I age, my face increasingly resembles his. It's a face I've come to dislike myself. I can't help but frown at Bob's words. Seeing my expression, Bob narrows his eyes. I can't believe the brother of such a famous company's CEO is our manager. The gap between siblings can be this big, huh? Bob speaks with apparent amusement. Yeah, he's a brother I'm proud of. I calmly reply, ignoring the sarcasm, and return to my lunch. Proud, you say? I guess that's how you'd see it. But from your brother's perspective, he probably doesn't want to publicize having a high school dropout for a brother. If it were me, I'd be too embarrassed and hide the existence of such a brother. As Bob continues, Sarah scolds him harshly. That's enough, Bob. Your comments are harassment. I'm reporting this to HR. But Bob just snorts. Ms. Davis, isn't that comment of yours power harassment? Using your position to pressure me, isn't that clear intimidation? What are you saying? Cutting off Sarah's words, Bob slams his tray with an empty plate onto the table. So I'm telling you, there's no way I can deal with some old guy who didn't even finish high school being the boss. Bob says this while looking down on me. At that moment, there's a brief stir in the surroundings. He's the next company CEO. The one who appeared was the CEO's wife. Beautiful and dignified as always, overwhelming the atmosphere around her. The CEO's wife leaves with a snort. Bob trembled, biting his lip in frustration. But then he seems to remember a certain rumor. I hear the chief and Ms. Davis are engaged. Is that how you got promoted from that rural branch to a management position at headquarters? The next CEO, huh? I guess education doesn't matter after all? All eyes in the cafeteria turn towards us. Go ahead, report my comments as harassment. The one who should be embarrassed is you, Chief. A high school dropout becoming a chief. And you're the next CEO because you're engaged to the CEO's daughter? Must be nice. I'm just stating facts, but your way of saying it is clearly insulting to Mr. Sawyer. As the two continue to argue, I quietly speak up. That's enough. Both of you, stop it. Bob, I understand what you're trying to say. You're free to think of me however you like, but don't bring that into work. You can criticize me, but if you have complaints about company policy, you need to change your attitude. no matter how much you dislike it. I'm your boss right now. I say this in a low voice, and Bob flinches for a moment, but after thinking briefly, he speaks. I'm handling my work perfectly. I've built up a solid track record. Even if you reassign my work to someone else, they couldn't do it as well. That's an undeniable fact. I can't possibly believe someone with your educational background can understand and manage my work. I'll continue doing things my way. I don't want to follow your methods. Saying this, Bob walks away quickly, leaving me to let out a deep sigh at his retreating back. After that, hectic days continued, and the season was about to turn to autumn. Unlike the small branch office, the sales department at headquarters is on a completely different level of business. Chief, remember that additional order contract we talked about? The client gave us the okay, so can you come with me to greet them tomorrow? Mr. Johnson still uses the title Chief without fail, but he calls me casually. As expected of you. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I'll certainly join you. The appointment's in the evening, so let's go for a drink afterward. Mr. Johnson makes a drinking gesture, and I answer with a laugh. Sure, I'd love to. Mr. Johnson is so good with people, he's called a charmer. His sales skills are always a huge help to me. That's why I can't help but be won over by him. Since transferring here, I've built good relationships, not only with veterans like Mr. Johnson, but also with other department members. The department's sales performance has been steady too. The only exception was Bob. Since that incident, I've only had minimal work-related conversations with Bob. As a chief, I can't avoid talking to him, but his attitude consistently looks down on people with lower educational backgrounds. Even when I try to check on the progress of his work, he coldly replies, I report directly to the director, so there's no need. It's a waste of time explaining to someone who can't understand. That'll be all. For now, there's no one more suitable than Bob to handle the overseas sales he's in charge of, so it seems the department manager is turning a blind eye to the situation. Jack and the young lady are tying the knot in November, right? It's crunch time for the future CO. The next day after work, I was at a pub with Mr. Johnson as promised. Salmon isn't as fatty this year, Mr. Johnson grumbles as he eats. The young lady Mr. Johnson refers to is Sarah. Of course, he calls her manager at work, so I guess this is his way of separating work and private life. There's no such talk about me becoming CO. It's already a miracle they've allowed us to marry. What are you saying? Who else would they choose as the next CO if not you, who the CO himself has been grooming since your teens? That man doesn't waste time on people without potential. It's a company where people are close to the CO, and it's not that big. Mr. Johnson has known the CO even longer than I have. It's nice if you think that way. The sales department's performance hasn't dropped since you came, right? It's not bad. Don't worry, you're doing fine. Saying this, he pours beer into my glass, which was about half empty, and smiles, looking me in the eye, saying, have confidence. The walk home, slightly tipsy, was pleasant with cool, dry air that made the recent heat and humidity seem like a lie. I hope things can continue peacefully without any troubles. Looking up at the night sky, I saw cirrus clouds floating around a faint moon. The next day, as we entered October, the weather changed completely from yesterday's clear autumn sky. The sky was gloomy and overcast, looking like it might rain at any moment. Chief, there's a company whose end-of-month payment confirmation hasn't been received. Upon receiving the report from the manager, I immediately instruct to check with the person in charge. This one's overseas, so it's Bob's responsibility. I can't help but sigh. The client claims they won't pay due to our breach of contract. An accounting employee reports with a pale face. That can't be. I didn't breach any contract. Check the contract immediately. I calmly instruct Bob, who's reporting with a raised voice. This contract was made the year before I came here. Even though it was an already exchanged contract, I want to click my tongue at myself for neglecting to remind about it. After reviewing a large number of overseas transaction contracts again with the company's lawyer, the situation was more serious than I thought. In the contract, The transaction volume was set as a target value, not a guarantee, but the final contract didn't have a clear statement about this. The other party had judged that the transaction volume was guaranteed. In short, their claim was that they were refusing payment because the promised delivery volume wasn't met. Worst of all, the contract was written in English. The applicable law was the other party's law, and the court with jurisdiction was set overseas. American law doesn't apply. Litigation overseas would cost a lot of money. The lawyer shook his head, saying that even if we fought it, it would only be a big minus for the company. This problem can't be contained within the sales department. It's a serious issue that involves the entire company. I checked the contract contents many times. Besides, isn't it management's responsibility for failing to do the final check? It's not just my responsibility. In overseas transactions, the final contract is everything. Verbal promises or explanations don't mean anything. It's your responsibility as the person in charge to do the final check of the contract. But now isn't the time to talk about responsibility. What's important is what we do from here. I'll listen to your excuses later. At my words, Bob fell silent. Since this problem occurred, Bob's complexion has remained poor. He keeps making excuses that it's not his fault. It was a relief that other tasks could be entrusted to the manager, Mr. Johnson, and other employees. Those in management positions and above were racking their brains over this problem. After days of discussions within the company, it was decided to negotiate with the overseas client in the form of a settlement. The settlement will likely take many months, spanning into the next year. Even though it's to avoid a dispute, it's unavoidable that it will be a big minus for the company. It's a small company, and the worst-case scenario crosses my mind. A few days after the settlement negotiations began, just past 8 p.m. outside of working hours, Bob stood in front of my desk. He looks like he's lost some weight. In his pale hands, Bob is holding a resignation letter. What's this? I'm taking responsibility and quitting. Bob's listless expression wanders restlessly. Responsibility for this issue? I point to the overseas transaction documents on my desk. Yes. I can't do anything for this company anymore. I thought it would be best for the company if I left. His voice is weak and trembling. We've thoroughly explained the circumstances of this issue at the board meeting. It's not just your fault. We concluded that our system was inadequate for this first attempt. Or is it that you're finding it difficult to stay here? No, that's not it. I don't intend to run away. I just want to take some responsibility. That is running away. My voice echoes in the quiet department. It's easy for you to quit. The company could fire you over this incident. But will the situation improve if you leave? The burden on those left behind is huge. Thinking things will be better if you're gone is just self-satisfaction. This is probably the first time I've raised my voice this much. A mixture of anger and futility overflows from my chest. I'm overlapping the image of my father, which I can't forget even if I want to, with Bob standing in front of me. Bob stiffens for a moment, his expression intense as he clenches his fists, but he says nothing. I start to regret my words. This will only corner him. I take a deep breath and start speaking in a calmer tone. I'm sorry for raising my voice. You have the right to quit. If staying here is too painful for you to bear, I won't stop you. I'll accept your resignation. As I reach for the resignation letter on the desk, Bob places his hand on it faster. I don't want to run away. I really thought this was how to take responsibility. But is it still okay for me to stay at this company? For the first time, the usually calm Bob seems to be asking for my judgment. I do appreciate your sales performance. Just keep moving forward, one task at a time. If you feel like you're drowning, grab my hand then. Will you pull me up? There's more life in Bob's eyes now than before. I can drown with you. I shrug. I can't make big promises about saving Bob, the company, and everything. At best, I can take responsibility together with him. That's a boss's job. Bob lowers his eyebrows and bites his lip as if enduring something. Put that resignation letter away. Saying this, I stand up, glancing at Bob, who's gripping the letter and wiping away tears. You're still too kind, Jack. As I'm buying coffee from a vending machine in the hallway, Sarah calls out to me. Eavesdropping, huh? I thought you'd be working late again, so I came to check on you. But you were talking, so it was hard to come in. Don't tell Bob, okay? She asks a bit mischievously, but with a smile. For the past few days, with this issue on top of regular work, she's been bringing me light meals, concerned about my late returns home. Just like with me, you'll take responsibility when it's needed, right? When she says, with me, she's referring to when I was transferred to a regional branch office 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I was transferred from the manufacturing plant to the quality control department. It was the CO's consideration, letting me gain broad experience that could be useful if I ever changed jobs in the future. Maybe it was out of kindness, hoping I could increase my remittances home by knowing various departments across the company. That year, Sarah, who had just graduated from university, officially joined the company, and I became her trainer. Although I say trainer, within a month she was handling most tasks on her own. Work was progressing smoothly, and both Sarah and I were feeling relieved. However, that fall, Mr. Johnson from the sales department contacted the quality control section. I got a call from one of my important clients saying they haven't received their ordered products by the deadline. What's going on? The client Mr. Johnson was in charge of was a very important business partner for the company. Sarah turned pale at Mr. Johnson's voice, mixed with impatience and anger. Sarah was in charge of the schedule. At that time, there was also trouble with the production line, further delaying the delivery date. The client also experienced problems when the expected materials didn't arrive, and the worst-case scenario unfolded in a chain reaction. In the end, the CO had to apologize and compensate for the client's damages. Thanks to the CO and Mr. Johnson, the contract was continued, but someone needed to take responsibility for this incident that had put a great burden on the entire company. The CO initially decided to demote Sarah, who was originally in charge. But I asked him to demote me instead. As her supervisor, please demote me. Are you sure about this? You'll be shouldering all the responsibility for this incident. The demotion will be to a newly established branch office, and we're not sure if it can be maintained after this incident. Are you prepared to build it up on your own? At that time, Sarah and I weren't dating yet. I thought it would be detrimental to Sarah, who was in a position to lead the company in the future, to take responsibility. Her setback, as the CO's daughter, would also be a setback for the CO, who had been my benefactor. I had nothing but gratitude for the CO and the company. That's why I thought being demoted myself wasn't such a big deal. I've just returned to headquarters, but I might have to go somewhere else again. Will you still come with me? Gladly, she answered with a smile, but that smile gradually faded. Will this company really be okay? This time, my demotion alone wouldn't be enough. The damage could potentially bankrupt the entire company. The crisis of the company her father had built up, there's no way his daughter would be okay with it. I'll do everything I can. I don't want to make you and the CO sad. Sarah's hand gently rests on my unconsciously clenched fist. Together, I won't let you shoulder this alone. Dad feels the same way. Thank you, Jack. I slowly grasped her hand in return. We discussed it and decided to postpone our marriage registration until the company's situation stabilized. When we reported this to the CEO, he sadly said, "I'm sorry for always burdening you. I was supposed to entrust things to you, but I told him I wanted to repay the kindness he had shown in raising me up to this point." At the end of that year, the settlement with the overseas client was reached earlier than expected. The company only managed to recover the greatly reduced payment due to the settlement, and the contract with the client was terminated. With domestic sales declining due to the weak yen, the loss of the overseas client was a major blow. It became impossible to collect the accounts receivable expected for this fiscal year, forcing the company into the red. If this deficit continues, we'll face a crisis of bankruptcy in a few years. The CEO is racking his brains over bank loans and financing. On top of that, He was talking to me about financing, including future prospects. At this rate, really? We welcomed the new year with lingering anxiety about the current state of the company that Sarah and I would inherit. Happy New Year! On January 2nd, Sarah and I visited my mother. My mood was far from cheerful. I hear the company is in trouble? I gave a hesitant, yeah, to my mother's worried inquiry. I had briefly told her about the situation when we postponed the wedding, but maybe Sarah had given her more details. More importantly, how's your health, Mom? Sorry I couldn't visit much. I didn't want to worry you too much. I changed the subject. My mother, who had been ill for a while, is now much better and living on her own. Yes, I'm doing well, thanks. Look, I made lavish meal, so eat up. The table was laid out with homemade lavish meal prepared by my mother. The quantity was too much for a woman living alone, showing how enthusiastic she was. Thank you. Let's eat. My face brightened at the kindness of my mother, who had been looking forward to reuniting with me, as I had rarely seen her since leaving home. Mother, isn't Timmy coming home for New Year's this year? Sarah asked. My mother looked at the wall clock thoughtfully, saying, well, just then, the doorbell rang. Happy New Year. It's been a while, Timmy. Happy New Year. I was surprised and confused when Timmy entered the house. Mother had told me Timmy wouldn't come during the first 3 days of the year because he was busy with work. Come on, let's eat the meal now that everyone's here for the first time in a while. My mother clapped her hands, encouraging us to eat, as if to ease the awkward atmosphere between Timmy and me. During the meal, my mother and Sarah kept the conversation going, being considerate. My mother brought out sake and appetizers. She was anticipating Timmy and me talking. Timmy, you must have been busy during the year-end and New Year, right? There was the Christmas event, and some overseas events too, right? I saw it on TV. It's amazing. Sarah happily chatted while pouring wine into Timmy's glass. It must be the first time Sarah and Timmy have met since Timmy was in elementary school. Ah, thanks. Timmy replied while accepting the wine and tried to pour some into Sarah's glass in return. I'm fine. Pour some for Jack instead. Timmy and I froze for a moment. I, who hadn't said much, hurriedly tried to decline, saying, oh no, I'll do it myself. But surprisingly, Timmy stopped me, saying, hold out your glass. Following his lead, I accepted the sake with a confused, ah, thank you. I felt uncomfortable in the awkward atmosphere. Well, I'll go prepare the soup. Sarah, would you help me? My mother said this and left the room with Sarah. Being left alone in this atmosphere was extremely awkward. As I sipped my wine, searching for conversation topics, Timmy spoke up. Hey, I hear the company isn't doing well? Mom, huh? I immediately understood the source of this information that Timmy shouldn't have known. Well, the CEO and everyone are working hard right now. In the current situation, the company alone can't handle it, right? I don't know about you being the next CEO, but in the end, you're just a section chief, aren't you? What can you do? Timmy's words made me feel suffocated. I felt like he was implicitly saying, don't cause any more trouble, you useless brother, when things get tough. Maybe you're right. Even if the company goes under, don't worry, I won't trouble you or Mom. I'll try not to be involved as much as possible so it doesn't affect your company's image. In the end, are you planning to abandon us and run away without saying anything, just like Dad? Timmy coldly shot back at my words, which I had said quickly while averting my gaze. Like Dad. Those words made me snap back angrily. Why would I become like him? I'm telling you, I won't cause you guys any trouble. That's exactly the kind of thinking I'm talking about. Dad disappeared on his own without telling his family anything, right? Don't try to act cool by shouldering everything alone. Surprised by Timmy's sudden words, I was at a loss for words. Why won't you rely on me? Rely on me. You've always been like this. Leaving home without saying anything, becoming a martyr all by yourself. Did you think I couldn't do anything because I was a child? Say it. Say you worked yourself to the bone for your little brother and mother. So now it's time for me to repay that debt. You knew? How could I not know? Even as a middle schooler, I knew we couldn't live on just Mom's meager earnings after Dad was gone. So I tried to work too. But Mom stopped me. She cried, telling me not to waste my big brother's efforts. So I studied desperately, went to university, made my business successful, and decided I would definitely repay my debt to Mom and you. But you won't rely on me. His face, full of anger, changed to sadness. When Mom collapsed, all you said to me was sorry. I had so many things I wanted to talk about. But you didn't accept that either, just kept apologizing. I felt like you were telling me you wanted to be free from me, who had graduated university, free from me who had sacrificed myself for you all this time. How could I think that? I thought you hated me because I couldn't do anything brotherly for you. I was making it that way. I wanted to talk to you too. Then talk to me. Don't disappear without saying anything, Jack. You're just like him. Too kind to rely on others. We're worried, Mom and I, that you might disappear like Dad at this rate. So rely on me. I'm not a child anymore. Timmy's eyes, not hiding their redness, stared at me. Tears were spilling from my eyes. After that, everything progressed rapidly. Instead of lending money to the company, Timmy offered interest-free assistance. Surprised by the sudden proposal, Timmy expressed his gratitude to the CEO, saying, "The CEO who raised my brother is the same as raising me." Furthermore, he formed a new contract to handle our products in his company. The contract with Timmy's company brought a significant promotional effect, and within a few years, the company that had been on the brink of bankruptcy was rebuilt. As performance gradually began to stabilize, spring was approaching. From this April, Bob is set to transfer to the branch office where I had been for 10 years. At first, he thought it was a demotion by the CEO or HR and was dissatisfied, but he was surprised to hear it was his own request. I reflected on how arrogant I had been. I felt ashamed when I realized I couldn't solve problems alone when I made mistakes. I want to acquire sales skills that don't rely on educational background or career at the branch office that the chief built up. I won't run away anymore. I'll definitely come back. I sincerely apologize for my disrespectful attitude. Chief, I'm sorry. Thank you. Do your best. We'll be waiting. I was happy about Bob's growth. After that, Timmy and I started keeping in touch little by little, and we were able to have brotherly conversations, albeit awkwardly, even on topics outside of work. Today is not just about greeting for our marriage, but I also want to properly thank Timmy. Sarah and I registered our marriage this spring. As an official couple, we set up a dinner with Timmy, who had returned from overseas. When I thanked him again for the company matter, Timmy smiled. I just wanted to repay the debt, so stop thanking me. Your company's products are necessary for our company's events too. We're really grateful. Timmy, looking troubled by Sarah, seemed fresh, different from his expression seen on TV or in magazines. More importantly, congratulations again on your marriage, Jack, Sarah. Sarah answered with a smile, though embarrassed. Thank you. If you ever get tired of my brother, feel free to contact me anytime. Sarah stared at Timmy in surprise as he winked. Hey, I almost snapped at Timmy, but I was surprised that my little brother had grown into a ladies' man without me noticing. What close brothers you are. Sarah laughed happily. I appreciate Timmy's invitation, but I'll never get tired of him. There's no one else as kind as him, right? As Sarah said this somewhat proudly, Timmy burst into laughter. Indeed, Jack is the kindest person in the world. At Timmy's words, I laughed too. To protect my precious family, from now on, I won't hesitate to ask for help from my family. Because I want to walk together with them,